talking about sports today, Nate, but a lot of our audience probably knows you from your political predictions.
Sure.
You correctly predicted the winner of 49 of the 50 states in the 2008 presidential election. So a good track record to stand on. Let's get your take, though, and how you're carrying over those analytic skills to sports.
Well, I started out in sports, actually, working for a company called Baseball Prospectus. And one thing that's really nice about baseball in particular is you have so much data. You know, everything that's happened on a baseball field since like 1876 is there. It's quantified. It's pretty good, like quality controlled data. And so, you know, people learning about finance or learning about, you know, other kinds of things, you know, budding scientists, it's a great thing to study, I think, you know, because you can get your hands dirty and not worry about the quality of data like you might have in the markets or so many other things.
I want to know how you do this. I mean, I see here in the notes a number of different tools that you have for analyzing baseball, but
Sure.
How do you pick 49 of the 50 states in the presidential election? Did you just have a good hunch, or?
No, we had a model. You know, I think you have to build a model, but at the same time recognize that the model is no stronger than what you kind of put into it, you know, and it's a way to kind of streamline your own thought process a lot of the time, I think. You know, I'm working on a book project now where I'm talking to people who do weather forecasting and, you know, poker players and people who have to be analytic, and, you know, but there's always the intuitive side, I think, to things too, where you have to know when your model's, you know, feeding you BS. You have to know when your model's telling you something which you hadn't realized before. It's tough, and it requires people who are creative and who are open-minded and kind of see little advantages in many different areas, I think.
Yeah, tell me how you build those models. I mean, it's got to be something inherently different. How do you weight each factor when you're looking at anything from sports to coaching?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you start out with a basic premise or hypothesis or just something you're curious about, frankly, and kind of build it out and up a little bit over time. I think you start out simple and then add things onto it. And, you know, when I was doing this on 538.com, we would get feedback from our readers. We get professors from Columbia talking to us. You know, it was more of an iterative.
You'd be tweaking the model as you went through it.
Yeah, I think you can never be too proud to say, "Hey, we have this model. You know, this is the best it can possibly be." It never can. You know, your edges are always pretty small. So my philosophy is when you can add more to it, and it makes sense. You can't just add more parameters just to, you know, then you run into overfitting problems and all kinds of issues. But when you can make your model, you know, tell you something new and different, and, you know, it makes sense intuitively, and you know why you're doing something, then you can, you know, I don't mind being a little bit involved and complicated, but also you have to have yourself there to cross-check it and always make sure it's not, you know, feeding you crap.
Let me ask. I mean, you're writing a book now. You've worked on baseball stats for a long time. You forecast the presidential election. What's keeping you from going downtown and trading options? I mean, isn't that where you can make the most cash?
I think that is so arbitrage compared to everything else, you know, where, you know, fields like media, for example, you know, they're relatively simple things that can be done with analytics where you might get a much higher return on investment. Certainly sports, and that's getting more fleshed out now in baseball and now basketball and football increasingly too. But, you know, I think there's something to being kind of a big fish in a small pond, especially when the small pond is something like sports or politics, which is a lot of fun and makes for good kind of dinner party conversation as well.
Why did we see the pickup first in baseball?
I think because the data there is the most robust, right? Probably 95%. It's not perfect of things that happen on a baseball field you can quantify, whereas basketball, they're getting better, maybe 80%, but the NFL, there's so many interaction effects, right, where you don't know if the running back's good or if it's his offensive line or his coach or whatever else. It's hard to isolate the performance of individuals. In baseball, it's pretty clean. You know, at the same time in baseball, you had this tradition. It's the oldest kind of American sport, at least, which was very resistant to change. Whereas basketball, they've come to it a little bit later, but they're like, hey, it's always been a new sport. We always want we have a salary cap. We want to try and get any edge we can. They have people like Mark Cuban coming in from the tech world and the investment world. So in some ways, they're almost, I think, starting to lap maybe basketball is. You know, the guy who organized the MIT conference, Daryl Morey, is an MIT grad who's now running the Houston Rockets. A lot of really impressive people in the NBA.
You must just get hounded with questions at cocktail parties and the like for your speculation on who's going to be the winner. But thank you so much for joining us. That was Nate Silver, founder of 538.com.